Well, with the most recent raid challenge, I was finally able to get all of the current titles in the game, all 13 of them. Obviously, Season to Dawn and future seasons will have their own titles, but if they're anything like what the Undying title was like, it's probably not going to be too terrible to get them outside of the ritual weapons, assuming all seasons have ritual weapons. So I thought for fun, I would rank the titles in a various amount of ways. Easiest to hardest, least to most time consuming, because why the hell not? First off, I just want to run down the rarity of the titles in the game, and I don't think any of this info is really going to surprise you guys. We're going to be using data from braytech.org and light.gg, both great websites. The issue with this is that the websites can only give data of people who are actually registered on the websites themselves. People who sign up on websites like these are likely to be more engaged with the game, thus more likely to go hunting for titles. For the most part, the sites line up basically the same. Braytech has lower overall percentages for whatever reason, although there is one major discrepancy, and that's with the MMXIX title due to what I believe is a bug in reporting the completion of a triumph specifically within MMXIX. Either way, the rarest title in the game is Enlightened, the Garden of Salvation title. This is very likely due to the fact that it just became available to get a couple of weeks ago. I suspect Unbroken will be the rarest title in the game very soon though, after more people get Harbinger and Enlightened, since those are more accessible. Of the older titles, ones that launched with Forsaken, Dredgen is the most common by a small margin over Wayfarer, followed by MMXIX and Cursebreaker. Chronicler follows all of those up, and I'd say that reaches the end of the ones that I would consider easy to get. Rivensbane is actually up next, followed by Blacksmith, Shadow, and the newest available, Undying. Getting to even lower percentages, we have Reckoner, Unbroken, Harbinger, and finally, Enlightened. Now I get questions all the time about what the easiest title to get is or the fastest, and I never really know how to answer easy, because easy could mean multiple things. Is easy the least time consuming? Or is easy purely the difficulty of each individual objective? Is something that is easy to do but time consuming difficult? Chronicler is an example of something that I don't think is really that hard to do, but takes a long time to do because of the Truth to Power lorebook. In terms of speed, Dredgen is probably the fastest / easiest, but in terms of pure ease, it's probably Wayfarer. I had a long discussion with a bunch of you in a live stream recently about making a tier list of titles from hardest to easiest based on a bunch of criteria and assumptions. Those assumptions are the following. Number 1, the difficulty of a title is solely based on the difficulty of each individual triumph required. Activities are done without any sort of cheesing or exploiting. Number 2, time investment is not difficulty. Double or triple valor or infamy is not included, along with non-permanent modes that may speed up triumphs. Number 3, each individual triumph is ranked on a difficulty scale, with Lost Sectors and Patrol being at the bottom, while Legend rank is at the top. It is assumed that you are at a reasonable power level to complete the activities required. Number 4, difficulty of a title is judged during the first 3 to 6 months that it was available. Number 5, the following was not part of the evaluation of difficulty. RNG elements like Ghost Ship Sparrows, the ability to find a group, or the time needed to play the game. And number 6, the skill level of the player is the average skill of a player who would actually be interested and capable of getting a title. We went back and forth on rules a whole lot. Should certain things count towards difficulty, extra rules, take away rules, but we ultimately went with this. And here's the tier list that we came up with. In the S++ tier, it is Unbroken by a mile. 5,500 in competitive one time is an impossible task for most people in general. 3 times is just insanity, and I don't think really too much more needs to be said on this. In the S+ tier, we have Rivensbane and Shadow. Riven's Bane is up here mainly because of the flawless raid requirement. In our difficulty ranking system, a flawless raid is second to legend rank, and therefore anything that requires a flawless raid is going to rank the highest. Last Wish has the hardest flawless raid out of all of the raids, in my opinion anyway, and therefore goes to the top. Not to mention the inherent difficulty of raid challenges as well. Shadow has the second hardest flawless raid in my opinion, but also had additional flawless requirements in the Heroic Menagerie, which at the time were pretty challenging. If you're getting Shadow nowadays, I think this would drop down a tier. In the S tier, we have Enlightened. Garden of Salvation has the third hardest flawless according to consensus, along with more challenging final boss raid challenges than other raids. In the A tier, we have Reckoner, Harbinger, and Blacksmith. The fact that we have Reckoner in the A tier, despite each individual triumph not really being that difficult, is a testament to how brutal of an experience getting Reckoner is. Playing Gambit Prime itself, not inherently difficult, and with something like Blacksmith being in this tier, requiring a flawless raid, it's tough to imagine why Reckoner is in this tier. I think if you wanted to push Reckoner down the list, you could do that. If Gambit Prime was a more enjoyable experience, then Reckoner's definitely pushed down, but Reckoner was anything but pleasant to grind for. Triumphant Invader might be a holdup for average players. Killing people with guns isn't difficult, but in the context of Gambit Prime, it definitely is a little bit harder. Harbinger is up here because of the flawless Master Nightmare requirement, the flawless dungeon and solo dungeon requirements, along with the Master Time Trials, which we rank in between a raid completion with a challenge and a raid completion on the difficulty scale that we came up with. It's not quite raid level, but it's not a pushover either. Blacksmith I could see being in the S tier with Enlightened, but I think it was dropped lower because it is the easiest flawless raid to do, although you could argue that the Sparrow part is tough for a lot of people. Moving down the list, in the B tier we have MMXIX. MMXIX has raid completions as requirements along with one pinnacle weapon from each of the 3 activities. Raid completions rank towards the middle end on the difficulty scale, but they're still harder than most other activities in the game. In the C tier, we have Undying, and by extension probably most seasonal titles if they're similar, and Cursebreaker. If we had a tier in between B and C, I would put Undying above Cursebreaker due to the time limit on Undying. Undying's main difficulty came in the form of needing a Master Nightfall completion and needing 3 ritual weapons in 2.5 months. Getting those rituals done quickly can be taxing for some. Vex Offensive ranks pretty low on the difficulty scale, although a flawless run is required. Cursebreaker, on the other hand, was mainly a lot of waiting around. At the time, getting Ascendant Challenge time trials done could have been considered a little hard, but otherwise was a mostly time-gated experience. You did need to hop into the raid a little bit for the eggs, which does give an argument for it being higher up. In the D tier, we have Chronicler and Dredgen. Chronicler takes a very long time to do from scratch because of the Truth to Power lorebook, as we said, but otherwise mostly consists of collecting lore pieces. That being said, you did need Wish Ender and did need to step into the raid to collect some lore pieces, so if you wanted to bump this up a little bit, that would be fine. Dredgen's main difficulty was simply a time commitment. You needed a bunch of resets as part of the collections requirement. In fact, the rarest triumph within Dredgen is simply playing a game of Gambit with all of the Gambit weapons. And at the bottom, we have Wayfarer, where the hardest individual activity you need to do is a heroic adventure and maybe the act of getting Sleeper Simulant. Wayfarer takes quite a time commitment, but the individual difficulty of each achievement and each thing required for it is pretty easy. That was the group consensus based on the rules. I have my own anecdotal list, which I'd like to share, solely based on my personal experience getting titles, with none of the rules being applied here, besides hardest to easiest. RNG applies, time commitment applies, grind applies. My list is somewhat close. I got some tweaks because of my personal experience. We have stuff like Dredgen, Wayfarer, Chronicler, Cursebreaker, all towards the bottom. But the one title that makes a big change is Reckoner. Reckoner is definitely the most brutal title that I've had to grind out, purely because of playing Gambit Prime and having to play so many games of Gambit Prime. I was playing with a full team that was also grinding for Reckoner, so we were all playing as efficiently as possible. I cannot imagine doing Reckoner by myself, and if you did, then you have much more mental fortitude than I could ever imagine. Reckoner is not hard to get, no, but the mental fortitude required to bash your head against that many Gambit Prime matches is just insane. Not to mention all of the armor requirements too, and playing Reckoning. You need around 120 to 150 games, and that's if you're playing almost as optimally as possible with a group. Never again. Unbroken, on the other hand, for me wasn't as brutal because while I'm not the worst player in the world, I know a fair amount of people who are very good. I got to 4,900 solo in Season 8, and I would like to try for a solo 5,500 run one of these days. And while comp was soul draining, it wasn't as soul draining as Reckoner was, and I would much rather play comp than Gambit Prime in a solo environment. The most enjoyable, and if it weren't for time gates or the RNG raid drops, some of the fastest titles to get would be Riven's Bane and Enlightened. I like these titles because they don't make you grind monotonously. They give you a list of challenges and objectives and say, go do that, and then once you do it, you're done. There's no grinding lost sectors, there's no 500 Le Monarch kills in a forge. Nope, you just do a bunch of one-off challenges and done. But the RNG factor with regards to needing some of these cosmetic items is terrible, and these RNG items need either a clearer path to them or just remove them as a requirement for titles. I would say Harbinger is somewhat in this category as well. Cursebreaker 2, there's nothing overly grindy in either of those titles besides RNG items. Shadow only had the 200 runes that was grindy, but even that was circumvented by most people. My only wish is that they weren't time gated, but I understand why the time gates exist, so there's not a whole lot we can really do about that. Missing a single challenge or weekly rotating objective can mean being one thing away from a title and all you can do is wait a month for it to come back. And by the way, I put Enlightened far down the difficulty scale because, again, this is my personal experience scale, and it was definitely the easiest of the raid titles due to the lack of grinding needed, at least compared to Blacksmith and Shadow, and how annoying it was to grind out things in those titles. Otherwise, my list is somewhat close to the same as the community list in terms of the difficulties and whatnot. Raid-based or challenge-based titles are the best, and the more grindy the title is, the less fun it is. Certain types of grinds are fun, but 50 high-value targets for Reckoner, 500 Izanagi kills in a forge, praying for RNG to give you a ghost shell that you'll never use? Yeah, that's not that fun. Speaking of fun, I also asked my community to rank the titles solely on how cool they were. That was the only criteria of the 13 titles, the coolest word that you would like to have by your name, and you can pick 2 of them. Here are the results. In first place, Shadow with 22% of the vote. That is followed by Unbroken with 16%. Harbinger is in third with 10% of the vote, and then we start falling into single digits. Riven's Bane got 9% of the vote, Undying and Blacksmith both with 8, Enlightened with 7, Reckoner and Cursebreaker with 5, Chronicler with 4, Dredgen with 3, and with a grand total of 8 and 7 votes, respectively, Wayfarer and MMXIX at the bottom with 1%. My title of choice is typically a newer title. It's been Enlightened for a little bit, but most of the time I wear Reckoner so that people know that I've seen some things. Things that people should never see. Anyway, that's how I feel about titles. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.